Welcome to the Evolved Caveman, where men learn to be successful and happy with your host, Dr. John Schinnerer, as he shares the most impactful ideas and practices for you to get the most from your relationships, your work, and from your life. Now here's Dr. John.
Hello, and welcome back to the latest episode of the Evolved Caveman. And today I am really excited to share with you author, speaker, therapist, and my fiancée, Joree Rose. And Joree is a licensed marriage and family therapist. She's a mindfulness and meditation teacher, a coach, author, and speaker. She also leads mindfulness retreats around the world. Joree has helped thousands of people to live happier and more fulfilling lives through living with greater awareness and compassion, allowing them to decrease their stress, anxiety, and shed unhealthy habits, patterns, and mindsets. Joree is host of her own podcast, Journey Forward with Joree Rose, and has authored the newly released to critical acclaim, A Year of Gratitude, Daily Moments of Reflection, Grace, and Thanks, as well as 2 other books on mindfulness. Joree's been featured in prominent media outlets such as OprahMag.com, NBC News, Business Insider, KTLA News, and many more. So if you're interested in picking up the book, which I highly suggest you run, don't walk, and pick up your book at Amazon or JoreeRose.com. Hello, love. Thanks for joining me.
Hey, love. Thanks so much for having me on your show. It's kind of fun to be in this space of being interviewed by you. Normally we do these together, but I'm like your guest today, not your co-host.
That's right. And it's lovely to have you here. So thank you for joining me after a long day of clients.
As always, right? But yes, happy to connect with your audience because these tools are damn important and we need them out now more than ever.
Well, and to me, I think, gratitude is one of the foundational pillars of a happy and thriving life. But let me ask you, why write a book on gratitude?
Because it's one of the pillars and the foundations of a happy and thriving life.
Wait, that's cheating.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Plagiarism. Why a book about gratitude? Because gratitude has the ability to shift our lens and how we see the world. And especially at a time after coming through and still not out of 2020 and all of the craziness and stress and anxiety that I know you and I both helped many people get through. We often can't change our external circumstances, but what we can change is how we can respond to them. We can change how we relate to them. And people often believe if I change my external circumstances, then internally I will feel better. But the old adage, wherever you go, there you are. We know that external circumstances do not necessarily change our internal landscape, our emotions, our mindsets. And so we've got to do that inner work. And gratitude, as one of the foundations of what I teach in mindfulness, is one of the ways we can rewire those habits rather than dwelling in what's wrong and what's not going well and shifting to, okay, what is going well? What's going right in my life? And then how can I harness that awareness to be able to look for more of the good? And if I look for more of the good, well, lo and behold, my brain's actually going to see more of the good. And then if I see more of the good, I can embody it. So it's a practice. It's not how we're wired, and it's possible.
Okay, so it makes me think of that seminal study in positive psychology. One of the things that shocked me getting into positive psychology is I think I was always a big believer in that idea of you get successful, you make some money, you make a name for yourself, and then you'll be happy. And what this seminal study proved, and it's very hard to prove causality in the social sciences, but what it proved is, no, that's not right. It's actually the other way around. So if you work on your happiness, more people want to be around you, and then you've got a greater probability of success. So does that kind of fit in with what you're saying?
Yeah, I think absolutely. In fact, right before I got on this interview with you, I was talking with a client who has done exactly that. She's done everything she was told and is now married with a daughter, successful, and realizing, oh, wait, shit, I'm not really happy. What do I have to shift? And, part of the struggle in our conversation was, well, I wasn't raised to be around people who spoke about emotions. I wasn't raised to have this internal awareness of what do I need? What do I want? What would make me happy? What is the greater depth? Or, how to express ourselves with that vulnerability. And so I think we can easily get stuck in, well, I wasn't raised like this. So then therefore maybe either it's not important or I can't do it. And, with everything that I teach, I think awareness is the number one step. You can't change what you're not aware of. So being able to be able to acknowledge with compassion, not judgment, because as soon as we have awareness with judgment, we're back into what I call the spiral of reactivity, in which we're now just spinning. And now we're just staying stuck. And then we're judging ourselves more and we're focusing on what's wrong. And so we've got to find a way to get out of that spiral of reactivity. Awareness is going to be the first step. You got to breathe as the second step. And the third step is you've got a choice. I can go back into that pattern knowing, and my client even said to me an hour ago, but it's really familiar. I know how to do that. Like those are my words that I always say, but she actually said it before I could remind her. And so at some point, those patterns, those habits that you know how to do, like, walking in your sleep, like the back of your hand, some point don't serve you. And it's harder to create the new patterns, but it's going to get you to where you want to be, which ultimately, I think we all want to be happy, but we don't just want to conceptually be happy. We want to be able to embody it. We want to be able to live it, not just, oh, I got a new car, or I'm going on vacation, or I got this new sweater, or, something more tangible. We want the intangibles, which is going to be that internal work.
Well, so what about the people that think that they should be happy 95, 100% of the time? What would you say to them?
You know what I've said recently, and I know that you're going to like this answer because it has to do with the movie Inside Out.
Oh, what a great movie.
It's such a great movie. And for those listeners of yours who don't know, John was a consultant on that movie. And it was actually one of the things on his Tinder profile that he listed that kind of attracted me to him. I was kind of turned on at the thought of a man having emotional awareness, so much so for a movie studio to want to have him consult. So back to your question, aside from the plug of your awesomeness.
Thanks.
So to get back to the question of, I'm assuming I should be happy 95% of the time. So here was the analogy I gave with the movie Inside Out. And for those of you who haven't seen it, whether or not you have kids, whether or not you like Pixar or animation films, does not matter. Go see it. It is a beautifully accurate depiction of universal emotions. And in the movie, there's 5 universal emotions: joy, anger, sadness, fear, and disgust. And they all take turns at the control panel of the brain. We assume that joy should always be running that control panel. And lo and behold, it doesn't. And so I was having this conversation recently with a client to say how interesting that we should assume that one of the 5 universal emotions, so 20% of the universal emotions, should be at almost 100% of the control panel. It's just not realistic. Mm-hmm. And so the key there is to recognize when we don't experience joy or happiness all the time, that nothing is wrong with us. We're simply human. And we have to be able to allow and accept and honor and have compassion for any of those other emotions. And then also know, how can I get back to joy? So I don't stay stuck in anger or stuck in stress or anxiety or fear or sadness.
Yeah, and I find that most of the clients that I work with, their go-to strategy with those negative, uncomfortable emotions is suppress, keep it at arm's length, ignore, bury it, compartmentalize. And what's your thought on that strategy as a way to deal with those emotions you really don't want to feel because they're painful?
I think that which we resist persists. Mm-hmm. And everything I do is founded in the tools of mindfulness. And so I go to one of the hardest and yet most beneficial practices. Well, there's a couple, but the first one I go to is acceptance. It's acceptance of, can I honor and allow and give space for the emotion that I'm experiencing right now and accept that it's what's here? And part of that acceptance is to go to another mindful tool of non-attachment, is to know that, let me not believe that this emotion in this moment that's difficult defines me. nor is it permanent, right? Because the most constant thing is change. So if we can know that this emotion is not going to be here forever, despite what we may think, our mind does not always serve us. And so having the non-attachment to this is not permanent, this does not define me, accepting what's here. People always say to me, okay, but Joree, how do I accept what I don't like? How do I accept this emotion? How do I accept this experience? Well, not accepting it doesn't make it go away, because that resistance, that denial, the pushing it down, actually, and ironically and paradoxically, only actually makes it grow.
Mm-hmm.
The irony is that when you can open up the door with compassion to what's arriving, it doesn't stay around as long. I've often said, if you push it under the rug, you're just going to create a really big pile under the rug you're going to trip over. And so one of the next foundations of mindfulness that I would guide someone in is the practice of equanimity, which is equally as hard, if not harder than acceptance and non-attachment. Equanimity is the practice of basically radical acceptance, having an evenness of mind, because our mind is a meaning-making machine. We're trying to make sense of what's arising. So we're instantly wanting to put things into categories as good or bad, positive, negative, I like it, I don't like it. And we, by human nature, want to push away what we don't like, and we want to hold on to what feels good. And ultimately, that's going to lead us to greater suffering, because we don't have all that much control over what's arising, but we do have control over how we respond to what's arising. So to meet this challenging moment or experience with equanimity is to say, here's what's here. I may not like it, and I can accept it, and it's not permanent, and it doesn't define me. And the more I react to it, the bigger of a struggle I'm going to have facing or dealing with it. The more I can have compassion and stay in the moment rather than fear the what ifs of the future. How long is this emotion going to stay here, or this experience, or rather ruminate to the past of, oh, remember when it wasn't like this and those days were perfect, which aren't always true either. They're just perceptions of a better time. We can easily have a greater ability to get through what's hard. And again, it goes back to, I think, one of the foundations of what's your mindset? Are you dwelling in, or in the habit of dwelling in the negative and ruminating and staying stuck? Or are you having an ability to honor and acknowledge and then shift when it's not serving you? Easier said than done.
Well, when you say mindset, and thank you for sharing all that, I appreciate it. It was an excellent answer. And you mentioned mindset. And one of the things that I was thinking of in your ABCs, awareness, breath, choice, is one of the things I'll do with my clients first is have them listen to that power of mindset talk that I have, simply to get them familiar with the idea of fixed versus growth mindset. And then there's 4 other areas in there just to show the power of our mindset. But I really think, and maybe this is the C part of your ABCs, but I really think that it is critical that clients come in having made the decision that change is possible through learning and effort.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the problem with change is it's not going to happen overnight.
Right.
And it's going to take time, and it's not going to be a straight line. It's going to have bumps and curves and twists and turns. And so to have the awareness that change is possible, even if they can't achieve it quickly, doesn't mean something is wrong with them. Doesn't mean it's not going to ever happen, and I go back to my own personal experience with losing weight. I used to be quite overweight in high school, and from my highest to my lowest have lost over 70 pounds. And part of that weight loss was through Weight Watchers. And I remember showing up one day, and the first time I was there, and I was 30 pounds away from my goal weight that they said was the goal weight to be within the weight range. And I remember thinking, I can't fucking lose 30 pounds. Like, that's ridiculous. I can't do that. Well, I've also taught my kids, as soon as you say, I can't, you've decided you won't. Mm-hmm. So language is powerful. The language in which we speak to ourselves in our own mind has great impact. So I think I'm positive and optimistic by nature, but I was able to shift that to say, well, okay, losing 30 pounds might feel really hard, but I can lose 1. I just have to lose 1 30 times. And so breaking it down to these incremental steps in which felt more attainable, more within my reach. And the other thing with the mindfulness piece is if you're staying present and you're looking at your moment to moment actions or reactions, you're not focusing on some future outcome as a success of a goal. You're staying present with an intention. And this is why I have intention as one of the 3 words of how I define what it means to be mindful, because it keeps you really, really present. And if you can be intentional in your response over and over, you will get to that long-term shift and goal of what you're working towards. So mindset is huge. And I often will say to my clients, because sometimes when they'll come to me, they don't believe yet that growth is possible. They want it, but they don't have the working model to know that they can do it. So I'll often say to them, even if you don't believe it yet, I'm going to hold the space for you that growth and change can exist. And I will guide you in how to get there. And as long as they can begin to trust me in holding that space for them and then being their guide, over time, I can point out their successes. Because that's one of the things I'll do with clients that I think we have a hard time seeing our own growth, just like we have a hard time noticing how we age or how our children grow and change. If we haven't seen them for a year, it's quite obvious. We can't look at ourselves in the mirror and see that growth and change, but someone who's further away from it can observe it and reflect it. And that's one of the things I love doing with my clients is pointing out, hey, you might not see it, but can I point out to you what you just said was an example of growth? And they'll be like, wait, what it was? Well, yeah, don't you recall of, even a couple of weeks ago when you did X, Y, or Z, and now you're doing A, B, and C. And sometimes we're so close to it, we don't see what we're doing as stepping towards growth, which is great when you can have a therapist or a coach to help reflect back to you. Yeah. Hey, you're doing this work and it may be slow, but it's shifting something.
So thank you for sharing that. And do you notice any, like of all the clients you've seen, do you notice any particular subset of those clients, maybe with a certain issue, that have the hardest time believing that growth is possible?
I would say people who've not seen it role modeled in anybody they know, because we tend to surround ourselves with familiar, like-minded people. And so if we've, been in a situation, especially with trauma, if there's been family history of trauma and you believe this is just how the world is, you believe the world's out to get you, then the universe does not have your back. And there's no example of success of having gotten out of that pattern. I see those ones as having a little bit more of a challenge in believing it's possible. But I challenged a client the other day on this who had no role models for success or growth. And, my compassionate challenge was to say, hey, you know what? You're actually not that special. The universe does not have the time to sit back and say, I'm going to pinpoint you as the one that I don't think has the ability to grow and change. Because we might feel like the universe doesn't have our back. The universe is not handpicking which ones it supports and which ones it doesn't. And so by pointing that out, like she chuckled and I was like, no, you're unique and you are special. Mm-hmm. But in eyes of the universe, no one is sitting here labeling you as someone who can't do this. That's an internal response.
Well, and I love that story in the sense that I think for so long, for a generation, we've been pushing kids and helping them to believe how special they are and how unique. We're each like a little snowflake. And, we found that approach had some issues with it, the self-esteem movement. And so it allowed for people to kind of use and abuse other people, even while feeling really good about themselves and having high self-esteem. And
but I'm so important. Look at me. Yeah, look at me.
But look at all the attention I'm getting. Negative attention is better than none. I like the idea of actually looking for the ways in which we're similar to others, because we know that bonds us together, it creates social connection. And I think that that's one of the reasons I love that level of emotion, because for the most part, everyone in the world has experienced quite similar emotions. Yeah.
Well, and, compassion and gratitude go hand in hand with the tools that I teach. And in the work of Kristen Neck's study on compassion, she defines that there's 3 components of the self-compassion practice. And one of them is common humanity. And that's the idea. And that's within the common humanity. It's while you are unique, your problems are not. And that's how I interpret that definition. That's what I'll say to clients, that no matter what it is that you're feeling, somebody else has felt this before. While you are a unique individual, the emotions that you are experiencing are simply part of being human. So at the end of the day, can you just have compassion for yourself for, well, I guess I'm human after all. And being human comes with this huge emotional range, with the expectation, like I said, joy is only 1 out of the 5 universal emotions, and yet we expect it to have 100% of the attention.
Yeah, very well said. So let's shift gears and let's dig into some of the why of gratitude. So what did you find out in writing the book? Why is it good for us? Why should we practice this? Why should we care?
I found out that there is a lot of different ways to practice gratitude. Because I imagine if you're listening right now and you think about a gratitude practice, my guess is you're probably thinking something like, reflecting at the end of your day, 3 things you were grateful for in that day, or you set an intention in the morning when you wake up, maybe some journaling, something you're grateful for as a way to kind of get you into the right mindset for the day. So when I talk to clients around gratitude, I think that's probably, and correct me in your experience, John, but I think that's what a lot of people consider as how do you practice gratitude? Like, let me reflect on what I'm grateful for.
Well, that's one of the seminal exercises from positive psychology. Write down 3 things that went well or 3 things that you're grateful for.
So I know before I did this book, that's what I really connected with as far as a gratitude actual practice. But I actually wrote 365 different ways. So there's very few that are overlaps. It was a lot. I mean, my kitchen table was full of Post-its in different categories and different ways, everything from meditations to mindfulness practices, to journal prompts, to reflections, to affirmations, to projects, to activities. Like, there's a lot of different ways to bring gratitude in. And I think the more we can get creative in how we engage in our gratitude, we're going to be able to see more of it. And, I remember years ago in really delving into my mindfulness training and practices, and one of my greatest resources was Dr. Rick Hansen, and his books, I think, are just phenomenal. If anybody wants to learn, his book, Buddha's Brain, his book, Just One Thing, his book, Hardwiring Happiness. He's got a newer one I haven't read yet, so I can't remember the name, even though you bought it for me. Thank you, but I haven't gotten there yet.
You're welcome. By the way, Rick is a great resource if for anyone looking to check into it.
And, he's combining neuroscience, psychology, and Buddhism, which I just think is fascinating as a interplay. But what he's describing is we've got a negativity bias. And that's what our default is. And focusing on the negative is what kept us greater chance for survival when we were cavemen. And we've got to acknowledge that when we are stuck in that negativity bias where we're dwelling in what's wrong, that we have to be able to shift towards the positive. And this idea that neurons that fire together wire together. So you're focusing on the negative, and the more you give it attention, the more it's going to grow. But again, when you have awareness, oh, look at that, I'm dwelling in the negative. You can take a breath, calm the brain, calm the body, and then you have a choice, right? That ABCs again. And part of that choice is to shift into dwelling into the positive, And those neurons are going to fire and wire together. So the idea is the more you look for the good, the irony is the more good you see. And positivity begets more positivity. And so, why practice this is because we need to find multiple ways, because I guarantee you, I know plenty of my clients can reflect on their day. You know what? There is nothing to be grateful for today. Today was a shitty day. We're still in the midst of a pandemic. I can't do what I want to do in my life. I just want to go get my nails done, go out for dinner, and get on a plane and travel. What's going on, right? So it's really easy to focus on what's not going right. And I like to speak to the words of Jon Kabat-Zinn, who's grandfather of mindfulness in our Western world. And he says, as long as you're breathing, there's more right with you than wrong with you. So even when we don't think there's something to be grateful for, the mere fact that you're listening to this podcast right now means you're breathing, which means you've had a 100% success rate in getting through everything you didn't think you could. And that is something to be grateful for.
Mm-hmm.
And
you're learning. If you're listening to the podcast, you're learning.
And you're growing.
But let me go back. One of the things that I love from Rick Hansen is his explanation of the negativity bias. With the simple explanation, the mind is like Teflon for the bad and Velcro for the bad and Teflon for the good. And which means that the negative thoughts, feelings, self-definitions like I'm an asshole, nobody loves me, all those things stick to us and we over-focus on them. Whereas the positive tends to bounce off us. And, maybe it sticks for a little bit, but a lot of times, for those listeners out there, think how many times someone pays you a compliment and you say to yourself, oh, they're just blowing smoke up my ass, or they don't really mean that, or they're just saying that. And so we don't even let the compliment enter into our heart. And I think one of the things that's frustrating for me about that is that people outside yourself can often see your positive qualities much more clearly than you can because of your inner critic.
Yeah. And that inner critic is huge, and it's going to want to trick you into believing something that isn't true. And to your point about the compliments and the criticism, I think Rick Hansen even gives the example of you could be given 10 compliments and 1 criticism. And what are you going to focus on the most? You're going to focus on the criticism. And I believe it's for a couple of reasons. Partly, we aren't socialized to feel good about ourselves. We're always being told what to do better, how to work harder.
Well, and our moms don't want us to be arrogant also.
Well,
a lot of men that I've talked to. Yeah, well, definitely my mom.
But I think that's a piece of it. Like there's a fear if I'm being too boastful by focusing on what's good in my life. Right. And yet if we're given 1 criticism, we believe that to be our truth.
Yeah.
So we aren't socialized. We aren't raised for it. We aren't in a culture that supports, hey, you guys, give a shout out of everything that is going awesome in your life right now. I was once told this, and I forget who I was told it by, but it really resonates. If you're at a dinner party and you're mingling around the room, and if you go around and to each person you talk to, if you start talking about everything that's going awesome in your life right now, you're likely to be considered the asshole of the party.
Uh-huh.
Because that misery has no company there, right? Because other people aren't going to easily be able to focus on what's going well in their life. And they're going to be like, wow, she's really conceited. Why is she telling me everything great? That makes me feel shitty about myself. But if you go to that same dinner party and you start complaining about your aging or your headaches or your digestion issues or your money problems or the stock market or your in-laws or your kids or your, like, whatever it is you can complain about, people will join right in.
Yeah, well, think of gossip.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think you're absolutely right that we are hardwired to overfocus on the negative. It served us well in the past. It doesn't serve us so well now because it's been trying to keep us alive. But in this day and age, there's not that many life or death situations out there. And our emotional mind is still telling us there is. It's still sounding the alarm. So let's turn to the how of gratitude. And I understand that you have a list of best practices on how to practice gratitude. So can you share some of those with us?
Yeah. So I kind of pulled together some of the ones favorites from the book. And again, I think the most typical practice is going to be able to do that simple reflection of 3 things you're grateful for. Although research actually shows that if you really want to go deeper and doing that same style of practice, instead of writing down 3 different things you're grateful for, one of the ways you can get a little bit deeper with it is to write down 1 thing you're grateful for and 5 reasons why. So
I love the twist.
Give that a practice, so go for it right now. Give an example of, so I don't do all the talking. You share something you're grateful for and 5 reasons why.
So I am grateful for my fiancée.
Oh my gosh, I totally didn't even mean to plant that seed for you to say that about me.
It was just sitting there. So 5 reasons why. Intelligent, accomplished, brilliant cook, thoughtful and caring. And I'm madly in love with her.
Aw, thanks, love. I love you too. So it just deepens it because it gives you a moment to pause, right?
Can I break in there for a second?
Yeah, please.
One of the things that I don't want listeners out there to just do the 3 things that went well every day and stay on the surface. Like if you do the same thing day after day after day, we get habituated to it via this idea called the hedonic treadmill. And it stops having an impact on your well-being. So what you want to do is do it randomly on days, or do it 5 days out of 7, but then also go to different levels of things which you're grateful for. And I'm assuming you're going to talk to that a little bit.
Yeah, I am definitely. And, one of the things I was going to say also when I was talking about always having your breath, we here in California, we have wildfire season, unfortunately. And one of the things that I always knew I was grateful for, but didn't really recognize the extent to which until its absence, is a blue sky. And, when we are stuck in that wildfire season and you can't walk outside because the sky is a deep, dark cloud, or there's soot from fires 100 miles away showering your backyard, and you can't breathe because of the air quality, man, having clean air to breathe and having a blue sky and clean water to drink, there's always something to be grateful for. So even if you're in a really dark, deep place, I know one of the things, John, that you really appreciate and you will comment on, which is funny given the fact that you even have some color blindness. So you don't even really get to see them in its full vibrancy. But when you see color in the world, when you see flowers, when you see, a blue sky or a green blade of grass, like you will stop and comment, like, can you believe that we live in a world that creates this natural color? Like that's a moment of awe. And awe is a great way to be grateful. And awe is a great way to stay into that positive mindset.
Yeah, so let me share another thing that I'm grateful for that came to mind recently. So I have as you know, I have a family member that was in the ICU recently, and we weren't sure if we were going to see this family member again. And eventually I got to speak to them, and just the simple act of hearing their voice on the phone, I was just overwhelmed with gratitude. It was really pretty interesting to observe as it happened.
It's beautiful. And we have these moments every day, but we overlook them.
Yep.
So I want to delve into, because I know we could talk forever, I want to delve into some more of these practices.
Yes.
So one of the first ones, so right off the bat, instead of 3 things, 1 thing and 5 reasons why. It'll make you pause and go a little bit deeper. Another way I like to focus on this is by acknowledging your successes throughout the day. And this I have found a lot of clients have a really great response with this, because it keeps us intentional moment to moment. So by focusing on your successes at the end of the day, helps you stay present in your actions and or reactions. And it can be something that you can acknowledge later on. So for example, if let's say my intention is to eat really healthy and I chose a good choice over a cookie, that's a success. And I can make that choice in the moment because I'm looking for moments throughout my day that I can later on acknowledge as a success. If I'm having a difficult conversation with you, for example, and if I catch myself in the middle and I reshift my language, that was a success because my mind was looking for those moments that I can shift back towards my intention.
It's fascinating to me because as you're talking, I'm thinking, wow, that first example you gave is really a way to build metacognition also, or thinking about thinking, which, we know from some studies that that's one of the key areas for strong leadership, to be able to reflect on yourself as you're reflecting.
Yeah, in the moment.
Yeah.
And that's one of the mindful moments I had early on as a younger mom. I remember at one point raising my voice to try to get my kids in the bath. And I had the awareness that I was raising my voice. And that awareness gave me the opportunity to pause and stop. Just because I started that sentence did not mean I needed to continue it. It was not going to serve the intention of getting them in the bath and doing it in a way that we both felt good about. And so that meta awareness is, again, to me, what mindfulness is can I be aware in the moment and observe what's arising and be able to shift back to an intention? So looking for successes throughout your day can keep you proactive. Sometimes just reflecting on gratitude can be more of a, not reactive, but a reflective practice where successes can keep you aware and alert throughout the day for ways you can shift behavior towards something you're in alignment with your values or your intentions or your goals that later on can be acknowledged as a success. So I love that one. And I've had clients love it because they're like, oh, okay. Like I really want to have a success to write about later. So what can I turn into a success right now? It keeps them very active in that. I love affirmations. I'm a huge believer in shifting our own language in our mind to believing what we need to believe in ourselves. And so a gratitude affirmation might sound something like, I am grateful for the difficult people in my life because they have taught me who I don't want to be. So even you take a difficult situation, or I'm so grateful for COVID to help me to slow down and teach me what I most need to know. And so you can turn these, awarenesses into affirmations of gratitude. And throughout the book, I have quite a few affirmations as reminders to value your experience, honor them, acknowledge them, even the hard ones, because in those affirmations, you can remind yourself what you most need to know. Like, I got this, I can do this, I've learned, I've grown, look how far I've come. And it can help you savor those positive moments, even while accepting difficult ones.
Yeah, I love that one. And, when I talk about gratitude to clients, I talk about it as having 3 levels. So there's gratitude for the obvious. So I'm grateful for my mom, my dad, you, my dog, that kind of thing. Then there's being grateful for the not so obvious. So I'm grateful for the ability to feed myself with a fork, or think my own thoughts, or walk on my own. And then the third level, and I would say it's the most challenging level, is to practice being grateful for your biggest challenges in life. So for example, I'm really grateful for going through a terrible divorce because it gave me great opportunity to practice emotional management skills, for example.
Yeah. There's always a reframe there. And, I love helping guide clients through the reframe, especially for those difficult moments. And I'm afraid they're going to sometimes interpret the reframe as, well, isn't it just convenient to name it differently? Well, yeah, it actually is, because your thoughts are going to come into your mind no matter what. So you can choose the one and interpret in the way that it serves you most.
Well, and for you listeners out there, imagine, because I really think this is one of the most powerful ideas in this conversation, that when you can get to the point of flipping the biggest shit shows and clusterfucks in your life to something that you're grateful for, what can't you do? Like, that to me is it's kind of the pinnacle or the top of the mountain.
So the key there, if I can add on to that, is we want to make sure in doing so that we aren't spiritual bypassing. We're not we're not just searching for the silver lining. We got to feel our way through the storm to get to the rainbow. And so there is always that silver lining. I do believe. I'm an optimist by nature. Yep. I think, you know what? I think this shit show of COVID, and this is by no means to diminish, dismiss or to deny the immense amount of pain and loss and suffering that has gone on in our world as a result. So this is not about being insensitive to people who've had loss and illness. And I think COVID has a huge amount of wake-up call for all of us to figure out, how do we consciously want to live our lives as we move forward and re-engage once the world opens back up? Because I even was talking to a client about this, and this goes back to the gratitude piece. She's been so anxious about the negative effects of COVID on her sons. And I said, well, what do you think they're going to reflect on this past year? And she goes, I think they're going to be grateful for how many board games we got to play. That's the reframe. We had to feel the emotion to get there. But I think there are these opportunities all the time.
Absolutely. And I love that. More? I love that explanation. So let me ask you a question. One of the kind of famous ones in positive psychology is the gratitude letter, where you write a letter to someone, tell them how grateful you are, how they've changed your life, and then you go deliver the letter in person. Do you have anything like that on there?
Oh, there's a lot of things I have in there. It's even, to strangers. I have, thank your baristas. So it's expressing, so the gratitude visit is, I think, one of the things that you're expressing. And there are times that I believe we can express and write that gratitude letter, even if we don't deliver it. I think it's in the act itself. The same way we can write a forgiveness letter, right? It's in the act itself, because the act of writing that letter and taking the time to slow down and acknowledge the gratitude is going to be what helps shift your internal landscape. Now, the more
it's funny. I mean, one of the things you were saying, thank your barista, because I've been thanking everyone that is working a day-to-day job with a mask. I will thank them these days and say, thank you so much for working today. And some of them are just like, what? They're kind of confused. And some are like, oh, you're welcome.
Yeah. Well, it's hard to receive those compliments, as you pointed out earlier, but the gratitude, extends to cultivating a culture of appreciation in your home as well. And, one of the things I know that you and I talk about in teaching our clients, especially when we're doing joint couples work, is thanking your partners for things that they do anyway. And, I know of a situation in which, there was a husband who took the daughter to the dentist one morning. And I said to the wife, well, did you thank him? She's like, why would I thank him? It was his job. Well, because it was a nice thing for him to still do. And him doing that allowed you to go work out before you went to work. And he was being a good dad and taking care. And
it makes him feel good.
And we forget that we can thank people for the things they're supposed to be doing anyway. Yeah. My daughter, almost every single night, will say, thanks for dinner, Mom. Thank you for cooking. I'm the mom. It's my job to cook. Many parents feel it's thankless, but we've created a culture of appreciation in the home to thank each other, even for things we're supposed to be doing.
And it works really well. And it's a drop in the bucket of positive emotions every time you do.
Well, and as we say, it supports the behaviors you want to continue to see.
Yeah, definitely. So it complement the behaviors you want to keep going.
So can I go through a couple of more of these different ways?
We got about 7-8 minutes.
Perfect. Okay. So I'm just going to go through them, and then maybe we can chat at the end and see which one stood out. But one of them I touched on a little bit a moment ago when talking about the colors in the world and the blue skies. But again, a foundational tool in mindfulness is this idea of having a beginner's mind. And it's the practice of looking around as if for the very first time. Mm-hmm. And so when you can see things in that moment of awe, when you get off autopilot, because we actually get into a habit and pattern of seeing things in the same way that we don't even notice what's in front of us anymore. So when you can look with fresh eyes, you're more present, and your experience is going to be richer and more grateful filled. And it's going to create a more positive environment if you can look as if for the first time. It's easier said than done because we're not habituated to that. We're on autopilot a lot. But it's a great practice of practicing awe and seeing as if, what would it be like if you walked into this room or this home or this natural beauty of a yard, or looking around. It's going to get you away from staying stuck and seeing things in the same, perhaps even negative mindset. So another one, focus on your positive traits. Again, going back to some of the things we talked about a little bit earlier, but we have a hard time seeing the good in ourselves. Mm-hmm. We've got a really, really, really strong inner critic, and we don't often focus on what do we like about ourselves. And in fact, it was interesting recently, my youngest daughter, who's almost 15, as you know, but listeners know, she's almost 15. And she recently was looking at this Instagram account that has all this positivity that she just was getting really inspired by. And one of the posts said, list 100 things you love. And then somewhere in the post, it said, how long did it take for you to put yourself on that list? Mm-hmm. And that just really spoke to her. And I thought it was so beautiful that she had that awareness, because we think about tangible things or others, but we got to include ourselves. And that includes dwelling in our positive traits.
Absolutely.
Gratitude can also be super fun. There's a whole bunch of ways throughout the book to do a gratitude project. Something as simple as painting a rock with a message or a word that is inspiring to you. I used to work in schools teaching mindfulness. And one of the things that we did is we had a gratitude wall, and you can do this in your home. Get a poster board and have an empty space on the wall and have a stack of Post-it notes somewhere nearby. And when you feel inspired, write something on the Post-it note and put it up. And when I was in schools doing this, my intention was to only keep that poster board up the week of the gratitude lesson. it was there all year long, and the kids would add to it constantly. And so again, a way of looking for the good and keeping a reminder of it. So there's a lot of really creative ways.
And we did that in the bathroom on each other's mirrors, just putting post-its for what we appreciate about each other, different ones each day.
Yeah.
I thought it was a fantastic exercise.
Yeah, it's a beautiful reminder.
Let me ask you a question though, because one of the things that crosses my mind, so savoring is a big deal when it comes to positive emotions, that we know positive emotions are fleeting, fragile, and quiet. And we often aren't even aware when a positive emotion hits us because of that. But one of the things we want to do is create greater awareness around the positive emotions and then label them and then savor them. So you want to catch them and then savor them. And it seems to me that gratitude is a great way to savor them and stretch them out longer in terms of duration. Any thoughts on that?
Again, I go back to mindfulness. If you're not paying attention or aware, you're not going to even notice those moments to savor. And when you slow down, things taste different, things look different, things feel different when you're being present and aware. So absolutely, to slow down and to savor, it also helps you harness that into other areas of your life. So I think that's a beautiful way of savoring. And the key is, when we savor it, are we good at harnessing that elsewhere? Which if we're not, that's okay. That's a practice, but I think that's a good intention to set.
Yes. So thank you very much for sharing all this with us. And it's time to wrap up. So let me ask you, can you share where people can get in touch with you and where they can get a copy of the book, and repeat the book title for us, if you would?
Yes. The book is called A Year of Gratitude. And you can just type in that title into Amazon and it will pop right up. Probably best way to find me is my website is joreerose.com. That's JOREEROSE.com. And from there, you can get access to, there's 13 different meditations in the book. And I've actually recorded all different 13 meditations. And there's the free one you can download, which is the gratitude one. But that's another great way to engage in it, is to be guided in the meditations. You can also get all the links to my social media. I've got some great freebies. You can get links to my podcast. So the website's really a one-stop shop. You can find me on Instagram at Joree Rose. And I'd love to hear how people are engaging with their gratitude practice. And if you get the book, would be very grateful for a review, because the more we can get the word out there, the better our world's going to be, because we need it now more than ever.
Absolutely. And so thank you so much for joining me for this hour. I really appreciate it. Always nice to talk to you.
Thank you so much, love.
You bet. So the listeners out there, for the listeners, understand that Joree's book came out about a month ago, and I still don't have a copy. So that's how hot it is. So I really suggest you run, don't walk, to get your copy. Great gift as well.
I'm grateful for you.
So
Maybe I'll
thank
give
you
you
so
a
much.
copy tomorrow.
Oh, thank you. That was my plug to get my own copy. All right. And for you listeners, thank you so much for joining us. I hope that this episode is chock full of ideas on ways that you can grow a happier and more thriving life. Remember, you got to practice the tools if you want the results. Just like going to the gym, if you don't lift the weight, you don't get bigger. So practice some of these tools. Pick one, practice it for a week or two, and then see what happens. And that's it for this episode of The Evolved Caveman. Please leave a review for Joree's book on Amazon or for this podcast on Apple. And we'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Thank you for listening to the Evolved Caveman podcast. If you like what you've heard, support us by subscribing, leaving reviews, and sharing the podcast with friends and colleagues. For the latest, most powerful tools to connect with like-minded men, join the Facebook group at The Evolved Caveman. Follow Dr. John on Instagram at The Evolved Caveman, all one word, or join the email list by visiting guidetoself.com.